Good morning, friends. We are coming to you from our Washington, D.C. area location, which is at 4865A Cordell Avenue in Bethesda, Maryland. Other ULT locations are summarized on the back of our program, which you can get from us in paper copy by phoning us at 301 656-3566, the phone number's on the sign up there, or on the web by typing into your browser United Lodge of Theosophists, Washington, D.C. Like St. Paul, we find the spirit willing, but the flesh weak. Yet the flesh gets stronger all the time as long as we are steadfast in our efforts to tune our personalities and senses to that quiet inner voice that we all have, what Theosophy calls our everlasting or real or higher self. Always the inner is the more perfect, and it is that which does the work of perfecting. Theosophy lays out the path toward achieving perfection by reaching up to that inner voice and in so doing moving ourselves and all around us in the right direction. Our mission in achieving, in the words of the ULT Declaration on the back of our program, a truer realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood, is something we are all working to realize what these words mean by our efforts to teach and to live the life. Our reading today is from selections from Upanishads and Tao Te Ching. We find on page 89 the Tao in its transitional aspect and its physical manifestation, these words. The Tao, which can be expressed in words, is not the eternal Tao. The name which can be uttered is not its eternal name. Without a name, it is the beginning of heaven and earth. With a name, it is the mother of all things. Only one who is eternally free from earthly passions can apprehend its spiritual essence. He who is ever clogged by passions can see no more than its outer form. These two things, the spiritual and the material, though we call them by different names in their origin, are one and the same. The sameness is a mystery, the mystery of mysteries. It is the gate of all spirituality. How unfathomable the Tao is. It seems to be the ancestral progenitor of all things. How pure and clear is Tao. It would seem to be everlasting. I know not of whom it is the offspring. It appears to have been anterior to any sovereign power. And then moving on to page 92, we find Tao in its unchanging aspect has no name. Small though it be, in its primordial simplicity, mankind dare not claim its service. Could princes and kings hold and keep it up, all creation would spontaneously pay homage. Heaven and earth would unite in sending down sweet dew, and the people would be righteous, unbidden, and of their own accord. As soon as Tao creates order, it becomes nameable. When it once has a name, men will know how to rest in it. Knowing how to rest in it, they will run no risk of harm. Tao, as it exists in the world, is like the great rivers and seas, which receive the streams from the valleys. All-pervading is the great Tao. It can be at once on the right hand and on the left. All things depend on it for life, and it rejects them not. Its task accomplished, it takes no credit. It loves and nourishes all things, but does not act as master. It is ever free from desire. We may call it small. All things return to it, yet it does not act as master. We may call it great. The whole world will flock to him who holds the mighty form of Tao. They will come and receive no hurt, but find rest, peace, and tranquility. With music and dainties we may detain the passing guest, but if we open our mouths to speak of Tao, we find it tasteless and insipid. Not visible to the sight, not audible to the ear, in its use it is inexhaustible. Retrogression is the movement of Tao. Weakness is the character of Tao. All things under heaven derive their being from Tao in the form of existence. Tao in the form of existence sprang from Tao in the form of non-existence. Next week's talk is on ethno-geological mysteries. This being the first Sunday of the month, we are having a roundtable reading and discussion starting at 12:30 p.m. on the book Living the Life. And now for today's talk on what is Fohat. Thank you.
Good morning and welcome, friends. This is collated from the Secret Doctrine for today's talk. The information about Fohat is scattered all over the book. In its primordial aspect only, can we call it an entity. But it is discussed in many different ways, and it's in many different aspects. It is also stated that Fohat gives us electricity, but itself is not electricity. It is very dichotomous statements when you kind of look at it, but that's what it says. So, our world has electricity in it. So that electricity is the work of Fohat. Is the work of Fohat, but Fohat is not electricity. And she tells us that electricity cannot be obtained if electricity is not present there. So, in its primordial aspect, it is an entity. Because what we are trying to understand is that the visible scene has a periphery, but that periphery is indicative that there's something beyond it. And what is beyond is the invisible aspect. So we are told that whatever we see of electricity in our world, heat, light, sound, from Fohat, but it is on the invisible side, because we're told it's an individuality on the other side. What's the other side? There is a pas naught or 0 point of science, and we in this literature call it Laya point. This is circle plus naught. Laya point, where everything becomes quiescent. It has no qualities attached to it, because we have to remember that Fohat comes all the way from its primordial aspect and makes things visible at this level where it condenses, where the material condenses. So in the Secret Doctrine we are told that Fohat is the one that gives the atoms, primordial atoms, because they are homogeneous at that stage, emotion, and it releases them into space. Primordial substance has no form, no color, it's just a cool radiance. So it gives that motion to it, and giving that motion, it starts the evolutionary process. So, how does that come about? Well, in our world, what do you call it? We call this process attraction and repulsion, because it attracts two unsimilar, and what is that in our physical world? Positive and negative charge. This is how combinations come about in our world, and two of the similar is repulsed. But at the higher level, this is what the world is stuff is. She tells us, the Secret Doctrine explains to us that at that stage, there is no order in space, so they collide. The primordial atoms collide, and eventually they coalesce together and they become comets. The first aspect is a comet. And when it loses its tail, it settles into space, and it is either absorbed by larger entities or it becomes itself an entity. What is she talking about there? She's talking about worlds. Just like our solar system, she's talking about, well, actually we're told that we should not take this stuff beyond our own solar system. So whatever is in the Secret Doctrine, we apply to our own solar system. And it is metaphysical. It is synthetic and it is metaphysical. So the comets then become worlds, suns, solar systems, whatever. But at first, the coalescing atoms form a comet, and then all the others follow. So when we look at it, we equate life and electricity as one. This is all equated as one. In this philosophy, life, electricity, and life is one. Fohat then is the essence of electricity, and that is why we put that first comment up there. Fohat is the essence of electricity. Is the essence of electricity. So there is this electric fluid. What do we call that? Vitality. Everywhere, everywhere. It is in everything. Everything in our universe has electricity in it. From the blade of grass, to the worm, to the human blood. Everything has electricity in it. Everything has electricity. There's electricity in it. So, for the occultist, what is important is that we can look at the physical appearance of, what did we put up there? Oh, I took it all off again. Light, heat, sound, all that has its counterpart on the invisible side. What is that called? The noumenal side of our existence. So, what is visible is the phenomenal, but what is real and what causes it is on the noumenal side. So we are told this is what? The shade side of it. The shade. Because it's not really real, it's illusionary. It appears that way. But on the noumenal side is the reality that causes it on the phenomenal side. So, again, this is a set from the Secret Doctrine, and we are...
Please don't erase it.
Oh, sorry. We are told that Fohat is the agent of the law. And I'm going to read this here to you. The qualities that we see that are manifested as forces of nature, the action of the quality of, or the special characteristic of its noumenon, which noumenon is a distinct and intelligent individuality on the other side of the mechanical manifested universe. So everything I said is condensed into that sentence. So on the phenomenal side, we see light, heat, sound. What does that indicate? It's movement. But the causing, that's the effect. The cause is on the noumenal side, and it is by a individuality, intelligent individuality that causes it. So, what we are saying here is that Fohat is the active potency of the productive power in nature. Active agency of the productive power in nature. It is the ever-present electrical energy. What does it do? It causes destruction and reformation. Destruction, reformation. This is what it does. But it is also, according to the writings, the bridge. We talk about, as the first speaker read, existence depends on two aspects of the one reality. And we talked about this before. Parabram, mula prakriti. Correct? And we took a coin and said, this is one side and the other is the other side. They're not separate. If one did not exist, neither does the other, because they exist together. And what did we call the prior state? Absolute. Now, the secret doctrine terminology also calls that the space, because everything that comes about in the space. So, how then does these two connect? This is the spiritual side, we said, right? Spiritual. And this is the substance side. So, the bridge then is Fohat. What does it do? It electrifies everything, as said. We talked about the primordial substance which is homogeneous. It doesn't have any color, taste. It has no characteristic whatsoever. It's the same. It is homogeneous. So what it does, it electrifies it. It brings it into motion, separates the primordial chords, and gives it life. So, how does that come about? Fohat, it says, is the bridge by which the ideas existing in the divine thought are impressed on cosmic substance as laws of nature. Without Fohat, then, those two would remain as they are, because this is what becomes the spirit, our consciousness. This becomes substance, and then at the last stage, in this physical world, it's matter. Correct? And this is our consciousness here. So, only in men, it becomes self-consciousness, because we are limited into this form. It becomes self-consciousness. Nothing else can observe itself and say, this is I. Not the I of the form, but the individuality behind it. So, and I will read it here again. Before it awakens to activity, that the chords in a space are defined as cool radiance, colorless, formless, tasteless, devoid of every quality and aspect. So it is the electric entity that electrifies all those primordial atoms into activity. And then, further on, it tells us that this is the pregenetic atoms, and they are the source of all life and consciousness. So Mahat, then, is the universal mind. And the Dayan Chohans constitute the sentient life, and the representative of that conscious life on the objective plane is the Dayan Chohan's representative of that. And then on the physical plane, electricity, primordial aspect of it, Fohat. And then on the subjective side, what would that be? The mind, the Manasaputras. Objective, subjective. During Pralaya, then none of that exists. Everything then is absorbed into space. How does that happen? Do you all know? You do know, right? We all know. First, the objective is absorbed in, we are the third logos, are we not? The second absorbs the third. The first absorbs the second, and then the first is absorbed into the absolute. One after the other, it gets pulled back to its original state, which is no state, right? It becomes non-existent. This is how Mahapralaya and objective life comes into being through Fohat, and then it disappears again at the end of the Mahaman mantra. How many years are we talking about here? 311 trillion, 40 billion years. So, then Fohat then is the synthetic motor power of all of the imprisoned life forces. Everything has electricity in it. What is that means? There's another statement in the Secret Doctrine that I would like to bring to your attention. You can go to your own it says that Fohat has 7 sons who are his brothers. 7 sons who are his brothers. Yeah, I thought about that for a long time. So, what is that saying to us then? Seven sons who are his brothers. The sons of Fohat are the various forces having Fohatic or cosmic electric life in their essence or being, and in their various effects. And it is called 7 forms of cosmic magnetism. In order to truly understand what is in the secret doctrine, we need to understand what magnetism and electricity is in its noumenal as well as its phenomenal aspect. Most of that information, by the way, is given in Isis. There's a lot of discussion about electricity and magnetism in Isis Unveiled. You might want to refer to that. But this statement needs to be understood. So, cosmic magnetism is what we're talking about here, with a capital M. We are told also that science to this day does not know any of the sons of Fohat in their true noumenal aspect. Why is that? Because it is only studying the phenomenal visible aspect. It does not have the necessary tools to go behind the phenomena and see what the reality is on the other side of circle pas not. So, let us see what it tells us. By the way, this is also, these 7 are also called the Shakti of it. So, it calls it the active and cooperative progeny of whom? We're talking about magnetism. The progeny of that is electricity, magnetism, sound, light, heat, etc. And occult science defines these as supersensuous effects in their hidden behavior and as objective phenomena to our senses in the world of matter. And what kind of faculties do you think we would require to see the noumenal side of it? Because we can, with our ordinary senses, we can only perceive the phenomenal aspect of it, not the other. And it is termed that these are ghost or shadow of matter in motion. Electricity, light, heat is called shadow of matter in motion. It's the effect that comes from the other side. We can only see it with our physical senses as effect. It says here, Fohat is said to produce 7 Laya centers for creative purposes. So, what might those be? Where are the Laya points? 7 Laya points. We're coming from the primordial all the way down to here, to matter. So, substance from its primordial aspect changes 7 times until it becomes matter on our physical world here, which is the most solid. So 7 Laya centers. Is the point where that form or force stops, changes its mode, and then continues on.
What is that?
Well,
You said the Laya is the point
0 point,
where
it has no characteristic whatsoever. It's quiescent, it's the 0 point of science. But we are told that there are 7 of them. What is primordial substance at the beginning that Fohat electrifies and brings it into life changes 7 times before it arrives here on our physical world as matter. 7 times. So
when you say changes, you mean, and you said earlier, reverses or
changes meaning, I don't know whether it means its vibratory rate is different, because we're talking about sound, light, heat. The physical phenomena is what this says here. Supersensuous effect in their hidden behavior on the other side. We only see it on this side as phenomenal effect. And in order for that to happen, the primordial atoms change, or the force or power changes 7 times before it arrives here. What that means, it leaves it to our own imagination a little bit. Perhaps it is the vibratory rate that changes, bringing different effect on this side of the world that we are able to perceive. So, reading it from the Secret Doctrine, the great law stops, or rather modifies, its perpetual motion on 7 invisible points within the area of the manifested universe. So it's motion, so motion is vibration, so perhaps it changes its vibratory rate. The Laya point then is what science calls the 0 point, the realm of absolute negativeness. It has no characteristics, it's just quiescent altogether at that place. So Laya may be thought of as the noumenal of undifferentiated cosmic substance, the root and basis of all states of objectivity and also subjectivity. And it calls it the neutral axis. All this is the work of Fohat, without which it would not exist. It is, in another place, it is called that Fohat represents the synthetic, meaning all of it, intelligences of Dayan Chohans. And it enables that ideology to come through as laws of nature by imprinting it onto Akasha. So, as we talked a little bit earlier, the suns, when they become too close, whether it is an embrace or a fight, we said this represented electricity generated by friction, or combining negative positive, 2 positives repel, 2 negatives repel, but positive and negative combine. So this is how the universe around us is formed. It is called, it says, thread of primeval light or ball of thread of Ariadne. This thread runs through the 7 planes, tying itself into knots. Every plane being septenary, then, there are 49 mystical and physical forces. What else does this correspond to? We talked about this 49 before. 49 fires in us. And what was that? Levels of consciousness. we have 49 levels of consciousness. 7 primary, each 7 divides into another 7. 7 times 7 becomes 49. So here again we come on the same thing. So 49, it says the thread runs through the 7, tying itself into knots. So there are 49 mystical and physical forces. So each level of substance, because we're talking about the primordial substance changing and so forth and becoming matter here. So each level has 7 subdivisions to it, is how we have to think about it to get 749. And each primary 7s has correlations in us. It has correlations in us. And each level then, each level of substance also corresponds to each level of consciousness that we have. So that is how this needs to be correlated. And we talked about the formation of planets and so forth, and it repeats it here. It says our sun is one of the countless milliard knots of Fohat, and that the central sun causes Fohat to collect primordial dust in the form of balls, to impel them to move in converging lines, calling it Kundalini Sakti, and finally to approach each other and aggregate, forming balls. What happens after that? These are all scattered in space, we said earlier as well, without any order or system, and they're called world germs that collide with one another, and they become wanderers, comets. After the comet loses its tail, their battles and struggles start, the larger bodies attracting the younger ones, and some of them repelling them. Many, we are told, perish, and those who escape become worlds. This is the formation of our universe we're talking about. Fohat then runs Dan Chohan's errands, because we said Fohat is their collective intelligence. He causes the ideal prototypes to expand from inside out and to cross gradually on a descending scale all the planes from the noumenal to the lowest phenomenon, and to bloom finally into full objectivity, which is the grossest matter here on our earth. And that is called illusion, because it really is illusion. But for all of the human beings on it, for the period that they require experience to gain relative knowledge, to get to the true knowledge, nevertheless, it is necessary. This is a very vast subject, most of which I will not be able to touch. I just wanted to finish by saying that we talked about jiva and prana pervading the whole body of man. But if Fohat wasn't there to electrify things, it would be quiescent in us too. It would be dead. It would be in laya. It is necessary that Fohat brings this activity in. And here we run this terminology again. The thread of life, it says, is the thread of Fohat. The spark that hangs from the flame by the finest thread of Fohat is the monad in conjunction with manas. This is us we're talking about. Or rather it's aroma. In each life, we have a personality. We're the same individuality from life to life, but in each one, we have a personality. Until that personality makes that connection with the divine self, only the aroma of it. What is that aroma defining? It's altruistic efforts. The things that are spiritual can only be retained as a beat or aroma on that string that we were just talking about. The spark is the monad, but it is in conjunction with manas that can have an earth life. Manas is the connecting link between the higher and the lower. And only its highest aspirations that are spiritual can be hanging on that finest thread, and it calls it an aroma. So Atma Buddhi then is the flame, and it finishes it by saying that all brain activity, cerebration, is attended to by electrical phenomena. The combination of molecules into new forms and bringing about new correlations, disturbance of molecular equilibrium is generated by Fohat, but it also generates electricity. All contains and is electricity, from the nettle which stings to the lightning which kills, from the spark in the pebble to the blood in the body. Electricity is the cause of molecular motion in the physical universe, and so also here on Earth. And we'll close it here and open it for questions. Yes?
The electricity is work that stands out to me. What happens in terms of the electricity that runs through our body? If we stop working, does the electricity stop? Does it diminish? What happens?
Well, first you have to have it, right? You store
Yes.
it, obviously.
Right.
It's in you, so you store it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Mr. Judge has an article where he says all our emotions are electricity.
Mm-hmm.
Because how would the other person feel what you are feeling? And what is telepathy? Mind to mind. We just
Mhm.
said all
Mhm.
all brain activity generates electricity, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
So it's like a built-in mechanism. It's not like you can't not have it.
well,
But
what is your neurons doing? What is the nerve activity in you? It's electricity because it has ions and electrons, and it generates electricity. How else would it convey the messages coming from the outside? And how is the brain is going to coordinate all that effort in it?
Mm-hmm.
So your nerve system, brain is all about electrical activity. And how does that come about? It is explained, okay? And it just travels. And you have to allow it. You give it access, right? When it comes here, say, it can go that way or it can go this way. Because in one article we were told it takes indomitable willpower. This is consistent with willpower. Because how is your mind going to work in that instant? Is it going towards its divine aspect or the lower aspect? Remember, in life, the mind works in a double manner. It has a higher aspect and it has a lower aspect. Right?
So whether it's higher or lower, it's still electricity.
It is electricity. But you are making it feasible to go this way or that way. If it is going this way, it's going towards this altruistic aspect of yourself. If it's going down this way, it is your personality in charge, and it is your intellectual mind. Intellectual mind has tremendous power, but it uses it for personal gain. It's not concerned about the universe, the welfare of the other. It is egoism oriented.
Mm-hmm.
Material. This is altruistic. Because it goes towards atmic
Mm-hmm.
light in you, and that one goes towards your personality. This is very intriguing to the student's mind, because even if you know the difference between evil and good, and most of us do,
Mhm.
when it is generally explained, we can all define what we consider good and what we consider bad. Nothing
Right.
of itself is, but the motive makes it that way.
Right.
However, there are aspects of our personality that kind of twists things around,
Mm.
and it implies one thing or another to you because you form that habit for a very long time. It's those that are very difficult to overcome because they're insidious. You have enabled it to go in a certain pathway for many, many generations. I'm talking about myself. And now you want to change it. That means you're going to, say you had enabled it to go this way all the time. Now you're going to block it here. This is nerve fluid you're talking about, electricity,
Mhm.
right? And you're going to close it here and give it access to go in a different way. This is how change in our constitution comes about.
Mm-hmm.
This is not an easy thing to do
Mhm.
because it's like lightning. Electricity is like lightning. You have enabled it that way, it wants to go that way.
Right.
And you're going to use indomitable willpower to close it, and you're going to open another one.
Hmm.
The grooves in the brain indicate those pathways, the grooves in our brain. And when you look at a newborn child, it
Mhm.
doesn't have many grooves. But
Mhm.
as we use the brain, we make grooves in it.
Right.
So,
Okay.
this is the way it goes. So your nerve fluid, your nervous system is electricity. You have a spinal cord,
Mhm.
Pingala and Ida, and a neutral center that goes up and down, is comes in from the opening in the skull and goes into the head, your brain, and your nervous system is what controls that activity. So emotions are like lightning
Mhm.
because we have facilitated that way. To stop that facilitation and open a different channel takes tremendous willpower. But willpower is necessary in this work.
All
Yep.
right.
So the grooves in the brain intrigue me. A lot of things intrigue me, but that one, in terms of when we are born, do we have like a blank slate up there? Do we have actual grooves in our brain that we can manipulate and change to make them positive and to the good, if you will, or negative to the bad?
Well, we
If
have
we-
a new brain in each life, don't we?
Yeah.
So as you use it, that's how you're making them. Aren't you? You
So
don't
when I'm
bring it with
born,
you.
there's no grooves in my brain?
Well, look it up. Make some research.
I guess my question is it, as a scientist, can I look at the grooves in a brain and see that this person is spiritual and this person is not?
Well, you have to be a master. Don't ask this a student.
Now, I wasn't going to ask you to explain that. Okay.
Well, we are
But the
told
theory
in
is-
each life you get a new physical body. Obviously, it's a fresh start, right? For you to do as you go along, how you're going to impress the lives in you. But remember, what else do you bring into it? You bring all of the skandhas into it from the previous life. Obviously, they're going to have an influence as to how you want to Even though your physical body is fresh, it is still made up of lives, and some of those lives have is impressed with your electromagnetic impress on it, because how else would they find you? You have an electromagnetic impress on those lives, and there are skandhas that get attracted to you when you come back into earth life, so you're pulling them all into you again. Those are the bits and pieces, we are told, that is unfinished business from the previous lives. Not lives, because it goes 3 or whatever backwards. In each one, you get a piece of it that you're going to deal with, because karma brings to you those aspects that you're going to work in that particular life. Otherwise, we would be so overwhelmed, we would just give up living. So karma is very tender and gentle. It only gives us what we can handle in each life.
So the same kind of question comes up, individuality versus personality. And other things came in my mind. I was trying to remember what they were. Okay, individuality versus personality. Individuality is, if you will, perfect. That part of our lives, that part of ours which we've developed to perfection, that carries from life to life. Would you say that?
Individuality is the monad in conjunction with the mind. We only have one mind, and the divine mind is part of that part of you that goes from life to life to life. What is that? Atma Buddhi Manas. And this is your individuality. The divine ego. On the other side, you have the lower quaternary. What are these? Body, physical body, astral body, prana, the life aspect that you breathe in, and your passions and desires, kamamanas. See, mind is working in a dual way. Over here you have the divine mind. It's one mind, but it works in a double way.
So out of the body, that individuality is divine. Out of the body, my
This
individuality
part
is divine.
This divine mind with Atma Buddhi Manas, there's only one mind. That's the divine mind. But in earth life, it has a double aspect. This science does not accept. This is the key to understanding human constitution. This is the key that opens psychological realities to those who can see it. Kamamanas, in conjunction with your passions and desires, is the culprit here, personality. And it has prana in the low or fourth, and it has your astral, and it has your body. All this drops. This part drops, but the divine mind, in conjunction with Atma Buddhi, goes to the Devakanic rest. And this coalesces, your astral body and your kamamanas, or the skandhas, remainder of the stuff, coalesce. Your passions and your astral coalesce. And its coarse aspects disintegrate, right? Where does it go? It goes to that level of substance it came from. We just studied 7 laya points where the knot of Fohat changes the constitution of that substance, wherever it is, and then it comes to another knot, it changes its constitution again 7 times. So all that finds expression in you. You have all of those degrees in you, because we have 49 levels of consciousness in us. that corresponds to each level of substance that we use. So it tells us that we are impressing those lives, and how we impress them determines whether they're going to be beneficent or maleficent to us. We're going to find them again. And Mr. Judd says, what do you do with your book? Fling it? Or you go, thank you, and do this with it.
So I can
It's
view
very
my
important how we treat
Wow.
these lives. They look dead, but they are not dead. They're not dead. If they were dead, they would putrefy and they will smell. We eat food. What happens to petrification? It spoils, right? So they all are alive because it has what? This essence in it. Everything in our universe has electrical activity. It's moving. Just because I don't perceive its movement, it doesn't mean it isn't. It says the spark from the spark in the pebble. We can, cause that pebble to make fire for us. I've seen the American Indians do it. So they knew how to how to use flint. So electricity, if it wasn't there, it could not be produced. So everything in our world, life is equivalent to light, and both of them are equivalent to electricity. Everything has electricity. When you even examine light, it has an electrical field, or it can travel as photons, as units, quantum units. Electrons, negatively charged electrons, can form a line, and it travels as photons. It has both aspects in it. HPV tells us in that book that light truly is not understood by our scientific world yet, but that in the future generations it's going to be more understood, and then that the book will become more useful to us as our understanding opens in that department.
So you mentioned, I think, ring past knot,
Circle past knot.
circle
ring
past knot,
Yeah,
and
it's the
it
same.
hit this student for the first time. I was thinking, where's the limitation of science? Because now, there was a time when science did not see germs, but they saw the effects of germs, of all the plagues that occurred. And then the microscope came along. Okay, they can see germs now. Now, they didn't see electricity, but you can sure feel it if you stick your finger in the socket. So those are physical to, I was thinking, well, one of these days, science
What's
is
the
going to
phenomenal
understand.
aspect of it?
Yeah,
Phenomenal.
phenomenal. So the noumenal is that
on
part.
the other side
Is
of that
on the
reality.
other side of that ring past knot. That science. So until science accepts the concept of analogy and correspondence,
Correct.
which is what Theosophy does advocate, it will never get to the noumenal side.
It will get to it if our scientists will become what? Occultists at the same time. What are occultists? You just gave a talk last week on this subject, did you not?
But occultist understands analogy and correspondence.
Okay, all right, but what else does an occultist do? It cultivates those inner powers,
Exactly.
correct?
Yep.
So an occultist, a mystic, perceives what's on the other side.
So I can
But
give you my.
through this philosophy, we can cultivate the active performance of those powers. But the thing is, those powers are all in us. They exist in us. Every human being has those powers that we talked about in them, but they are quiescent. They're not active. They do their automatic functions, but we don't use them voluntarily because we haven't learned to do so yet. At one time, we didn't know how to breathe. We were breathing by effort. We had to learn how to do it. Just like when the baby comes and doesn't know how to walk, and it has to learn how to do it, We had to learn how to breathe. We had to learn how to eat. Now they are automatic, involuntary. There are centers, ganglions in the body that control it. Where cerebellum is the frontal, cerebellum is the oldest part of the brain. Those functions are either controlled by the stem or the cerebellum. So we have all these powers, but the thing is, the human being has to become a muni, a spiritual human being whose sole purpose is to give light to those who have it less than himself or herself. In other words, this power that comes is given to that individual as a gift for the service rendered on behalf of humanity. It's not that you get the power first. The power comes as a result of service to humanity. It's there. All of these powers are there. Now we need to conclude, and then I will answer some of your other questions.
I have a question.
Yes.
Magnetism, is that different than electricity?
Well, you know that it converts, right? It's interchangeable.
No, I don't know that. What do you mean?
Yeah. One becomes the other. It's interchangeable.
I'm thinking about my experiments and so forth. A magnet is an object. A magnet is that horseshoe, or whatever the thing is.
That's a physical,
now the electricity is running through it.
representation of it.
Right.
We're talking about cosmic magnetism here, whose progeny was heat, light, and sound, and so forth. It has different aspects to it. It has its cosmic aspect. We said Fohat does what for us? What was the statement we read? It says, electricity is the work of Fohat, but Fohat is not electricity, it's secret doctrine. But to answer the student's question, those two are interchangeable.
Electricity is the work of Fohat, but
Fohat
is not electricity.
Because it's the essence, it's the spiritual aspect of it. It's that essence that is distributed everywhere.
Okay, so heat, light, sound, that's magnetism. That's not, is that electricity or is that magnetism?
Cosmic magnetism with a big
Yeah.
M, because it collects everything under magnetism. And then lists electricity with the little electricity this way, and magnetism this way, and sound, light, heat. Remember the suns and
And life?
Yeah, light too.
Life?
Light.
L-I-F-E.
Life equals light, and both equal electricity is what the secret doctrine tells us.
So you would you include life in magnetism?
No, I wouldn't.
No.
Because I do not know where it fits in my mind yet. It is given this
But
way.
electricity, small, and magnetism, sound, light, heat,
All these are in this magnetism.
are in,
the big M.
are gathered into magnetism.
Yeah, it's called magnetism. But this student has also read articles where it says that the earthly magnetism has two aspects, attraction
And
repulsion.
repulsion.
But the scientific aspect of it is only attraction. Attraction. Because what is that called here on earth? What do we call the apple that falls down to the ground?
Gravity.
There you go. It doesn't include the other half. Gravity is one half of it. The other half is repulsion. And we are told in the secret doctrine all the universe works on that basis. And this student doesn't know whether that is also correlated to the forces internal and forces external. Because we have internal forces, but we also gather forces from the outside in, from the periphery, right? Because we have senses, we gather information. So, how that works, the student does not know.
So when people say we're surrounded, as individuals are surrounded by electromagnetic fields.
Yeah.
What does that? Can you help me understand what that means when you say we're surrounded by electromagnetic fields?
Okay, electricity goes this way, but magnetism is that way. It's, in other words, one is flat, one is upright.
So the field is the grouping of that those waves, those.
Well,
those
this is electricity moving this way,
Right.
and magnetic field is flat underneath it. It creates it. So that is why it is stated that it is interchangeable.
I see.
One moves into the
The
other.
other.
Because in the, I think it was in ISIS, read it a long time ago, that we store magnetism, and the belly button, I think, is the place. I hope that is
Solar
not
plexus.
on. Herb? I hope that isn't on.
It is on. Why shouldn't it be? Go
Well,
ahead.
I'm not 100% sure of
You're
this.
doing fine.
statement.
You're doing fine.
You have
Please.
You have to do the best you can. You said based on what you know now, here's the
It's been a
answer.
long time since I read it. I don't remember it 100%. I didn't gather it for this, but a long time ago, read it, that we store it somewhere in the body, and I think it's there, and I'm not sure. I didn't do any research in that department for today.
If you were sure, you would then we know you're an occultist. We know you're a perfected being. So,
No, I'm not a perfect.
or that you are way out in left field.
One more question.
Yeah.
When you say primordial and mula prakriti, the primordial substance is not the same as the mula prakriti. Is it? Or is the primordial substance comes from the mula prakriti?
Mula prakriti is defined as the veil thrown all over the expanse of the space,
Right.
universe.
Yes.
The veil. And this student was asking, can the logoic light perceive Parabrahm without that veil? And the answer given is no. It cannot be perceived without the veil being thrown over it. So I hope that helps you, because your specific questions this student does not want to answer, because it can be said that Mula Prakriti at its first stage of differentiation has to become Prakriti. And Prakriti is defined as Akasha, the divine Akasha. And Akasha has 7 levels. At its highest, it's the spiritual fluid. At its lowest, I assume it becomes matter. It's not given in that exact terminology. It leaves it up to you to kind of figure it out.
So the differentiation.
Differentiation.
Let me finish the question. The differentiation, when you're talking about the Akasha,
Yeah. Divine
is
Akasha.
yes, the divine Akasha. The divine Akasha is a differentiation of the Mula Prakriti, because the Akasha, the first differentiation would be the Prakriti on a divine level, and you just said that the
Divine
Akasha.
is also divine.
eh?
Divine Akasha is also divine.
Well, so is the divine Prakriti the divine Akasha? Because I think that's what you just said. I'm not sure.
Well, we can take it perhaps that way, that Prakriti is Akasha in its first
Differentiation.
aspect. Yeah, in its first aspect. Because primordial is undifferentiated, homogeneous substance. And it has to differentiate once, it has to differentiate twice.
Okay, so the primordial would be even before you get to Akasha.
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
I think so.
Research and let me know.
I think so.
Okay, the next talk on Fohat. Next.
Next week's talk is not Fohat.
No, I know, but you said you needed to do some more on Fohat.
No.
Can we look forward to this continuing?
Yes, can we look forward to some more Fohat? Very complex
It's very complex.
and not easy to digest.
We can talk about it several
You
times.
can
and not
research it,
understand.
and then you can come back and answer some of my questions.
So stay tuned for November, December program, right?
Right.